בוקר טוב, קהל קדוש, מסכת נדרים, דף בית עמוד א', 2A1, a new Masechet. We're starting everything new. You heard? Okay. So the bet Amud Aleph comes and starts like this. We're talking about obviously the entire Masechet is talking about lo yachel devaro kechol yotze mipiv yaseh, which means a person, right, has to come, and when they make a neder, right, so they're going to fulfill the neders. There's also going to be a concept of making themselves a neder. What does that mean? That, for example, they're not going to benefit from something. So there's many different things that we're going to be learning throughout this Masechet. And the first one starts, right, as follows. Okay, kol kinuye nedarim. Nedarim. All the kinuye nedarim, which are like lishonot of neder, are like nedarim. So, for example, if a person comes and he says, "Hareki karze alai ke korban," or he says, "Hareki karze alai ke kunam," instead of saying alai ke korban, he says ke kunam. That's also a neder. So, any type of a kinui of a neder is like a neder in itself as well, which means anything which is like a nickname, or that means you don't have to actually say the word, the magic word. It's the same thing. Vacharamim. Any type of a cherem is like a charamim. What does that mean? Any type of kinuye charamim are just like a cherem in itself. Shavuot are like shavuot. Any type of a kinui of shavua is like a shavua. Obviously, we're going to speak about in 1 minute what's the differences in all these different things. Or in nezirut. Exactly. We speak about all these things. Kenezirut. Okay, so that means these are just, so one more time, we had nedarim, charamim, shavuot, and nezirut. Okay, and that's what we do for our Tarat Nedarim, and that's what we do. So let's go one by one. If you pay attention, what exactly is a neder? So a neder, right, or kunam is a kinui for a korban, right? And also kunach or kunas or also. So kunache, kunase, that would be saying kal nidre, right, are all lishonot of nedarim of kunam. Okay, now what happens is as follows. So now, what is the first one? So the first one was any type of a neder. What is a neder? Which means this bread is going to be for me like a korban. That's called a neder. Okay, very good. What's the next one? The next one is going to be a cherem. What's a cherem? Cherem are also part of nidre isur. But stam nedarim, which are brought down in our Mishnah, are nedarim that the person is coming and saying the isur, belashon isur. So for example, he says, this bread is a sur alai, or is a sur on him, or on him, or on him, right? Or blashon korban. It's going to be for me like a korban. A cherem is that he's just saying a blashon cherem. So for example, harreni alecha cherem. I didn't say anything to do with a korban, and I didn't say anything to do with an isur. I didn't mention the word isur. I just say harreni alecha cherem. What does that mean? That now you're not allowed to come and to benefit from me. Okay, hareni alecha cherem means that even though I didn't mention one more time, if I mentioned the lashon isur or a korban, so that's a neder. The second that I came and I said a cherem says hareni alecha cherem. What does that mean? You're not allowed to benefit from it. I didn't mention isur, and I didn't mention korban. If I mention isur or korban, it's a neder. I didn't mention isur or korban, it's a cherem. Cherem is also a type of a neder. Okay, but it's called a cherem. Okay, so no, it's not yoter nemuch. It's a different type of a neder. It's also part of a neder, but it's a different type of a neder. Okay, so if he said harei ata cherem alai, means that I'm not allowed to benefit from you, right? Or it's kilu I said hanatecha is a sur to me like hekdesh, so I'm not allowed to benefit from you, just like I'm not allowed to benefit from hekdesh. There's another type of a cherem, which is brought down in the Torah, which basically you consecrate all your properties to the Kohen or to the Bedek Bait, the Bet HaMikdash. That's also called cherem. Okay, so that's also a cherem. So a cherem is also a consecration of all your properties to the Bet HaMikdash. So one more time. Neder is, I mentioned that something is going to be a sur or like a korban. So for example, this telephone is going to be a neder, or it's going to be, right? So what does that mean? He's going to say it's a sur or it's like a korban on him. What does that mean? He's not allowed to benefit from the korban. He's not allowed to benefit from the phone. Okay, that's going to be a neder. Cherem just says, this phone is a cherem on to me, or I'm a cherem to him, and so on and so forth. So therefore, I didn't mention isur or korban, but it's the same halachot. The exact same thing as a cherem. There's another type of a cherem. He comes and he says all his properties, everything that he has, this, that, everything, but even the shirt, everything is going to be what? Cherem to the Bet HaMikdash, or cherem to the Bet HaKabayim. Okay? Fine. Next. Better Knesset, 100%. Shavuot. What is Shavuot? Are you listening? Right? What is Shavuot? Yeah? Yeah. What is Shavuot? Yeah? So he comes and he says like this. What exactly is Shavuot? So he comes and he says like this. Shavuot is, for example, he comes and he says, right? Shavua shelo ochal kikar zeh. So now he makes a vow, he will not eat this bread. One more time. Neder is, this bread is a sur to me, or this bread is a korban to me. So just like I can't benefit from a korban, I cannot benefit from the bread. Shavua is, I make a shavua, I'm not going to eat this bread. There's no isur on the bread, or I'm not saying the korban on the bread. I'm making a shavua that I will not eat the bread. That is called a shavua. Okay, makes sense or not?
Yeah, but this is like a strong.
Yeah. One more time. One second. Okay, so now he comes and he says, okay, there's 1 second, we're gonna see. There's also, by the way, that it's mashma that Askarat name of Hashem is also considered a Shavua, even though he doesn't mention the name of the Shavua. Because sometimes, for example, he says, Belokei Israel, I'm not going to reveal this to you. So therefore, even though he didn't say a Shavua, he's not going to reveal it to you. But when he says Elokei Israel, right, Belokei Israel, with the God of Israel, I'm not going to reveal this to you. That's ki'ilu that he made a Shavua because he used the name of Hashem. Okay, fine. So that is called Shavua. So how many do we have until now? We had Neder, Cherem, and Shavua. Make sense? Neder, Cherem, Shavua. Now remember, any kinui is like the same thing. So we said that the case of a Neder was Asur or Kurban. The kinui of that was Kunach, Kunas, or Kunam. Those were kinuyim for neder, right? That's what we say. Kuname, kunache, kunase. Those are three kinuyim for neder. Kinui means I didn't actually use the word asur or korban, but I said it's going to be like kunam. It's going to be kunach. Which is a neder, exactly. Okay, so those are kinuyim for neder, right? What's a kinui for the cherem? So he comes and he says, right, is, for example, right, we said that there had to be the charamim is lashon cherem. So some of you are cherem. So he comes and he says, right, there's the concept of the kinui of the cherem is through the word, for example, charak, charas, and charaf. So nechasim elu charak alai, or nechasim elu charaf alai, or charas alai. So those are three other ones which are kinuyim for cherem. So one more time, neder is isur or korban. The kinui, which is the nickname for the korban or the isur, is kuname, kunam, kunas, kunach. Those are three. And we have cherem. Cherem is, right, is not isur or korban, but rather is that charam, that he's not going to come. This is charam alai, or ani charam alecha. That's called the cherem. Right? It's like cherem, technically speaking, if you think about it, it's like an excommunication. You have nothing to do with that object. So you're not saying that the object is a sur, you're not saying it's a korban, but I have nothing to do with this object has nothing to do with me. That's called the cherem. The three kinuyim for cherem, right? The three kinuyim for cherem is charak, charas, and charaf. Okay? Very good. Next, what do we say? Shavua. So the shavua is what we just mentioned. Okay? And there's also going to be, right, the how do you call this? The concept of shavua, that we're going to have a kinui, okay? So when we're talking about, okay, what exactly is Nazirut? So the Nazirut, he comes over here, is if a person comes to make it a neder, that he's going to become a Nazir. So he's here, right? He becomes prohibited in wine and everything that comes out of the wine, right? So the same thing, he's not allowed to cut his hair, he's not allowed to become Tamemet. So the neder of the Nazirut is called Nazirut, right? Why? Because he says, Hareni Nazir. If he comes and he says that I am a Nazir, he becomes a Nazir, right? So if he comes and he says, Hareni Nazik, so that's a kinui. Because the kinui is Nazik for Nazir, and then he becomes a Nazir. Okay, so the kinui, remember, because the Mishnah started off by saying any kinui of these things are the exact same thing. So it means even though you give a nickname for it, it's the exact same thing. So the kinui of a neder is like a neder. The kinui of the cherem is like a cherem. Kinui of the shavuot is like a shavuot. Kinui of the nizirut is like a nizirut. Okay? Nekuda. Until here, everyone's clear. Talking about a korban. The korban is which type?
Neder.
Sheneder. Chazak u'ruf.
What do you mean? Shemayin.
Sheneder. We said that the korban is the neder is lashon of isur or korban. This is like a korban to me. That's a neder. The Nazirut is the last one, is the most simplest one, which means the person says that he's going to become a Nazir. So that's any Nazir, that's Nazirut. Somebody that comes and he says to his friend, where the bottom part of the Mishnah, Mudarani mimcha, mufreshani mimcha, meruchakani mimcha, shani ochel lecha, shani toem lecha, asur. What does that mean? These are now called kinuye nedarim, okay, which they learn yadot nedarim, which means only part of them is like a lashon of a neder. So somebody comes and he says, I am mudar from you, which means I'm not allowed to benefit from you, or I'm separated from you, right? Or I'm distanced from you, or I'm going to eat you, or I'm going to taste you, or things like that, right? So he says, asur. So he comes and he says, it's asur because his neder. Menudani lecha. He's going to come and he says that he's menudetim, excommunicated to him. Rabbi Kiva says, he used to say that maybe when you have to be in nachmid, to say that behemet it's going to become prohibited. Okay, that's what it means. Means that he's like thinking about it. That maybe behemet you have to be machmid, and therefore it's going to be a problem. So with that, we finished the first Mishnah, which is basically Bet Amud Aleph. Now we're starting Bet Amud Bet. 2B. Okay, it's either to be or not to be. You listening? To be or not to be? Says Gemara. What? All kinuye nedarim kenedarim. Right? He comes and he says, all the kinuye nedarim are like nedarim. Why is it that by the nazir, we do not come and teach, right, all the dinim that have to do with the kinuyim? So why is it by nedarim? We did mention. Meaning we said, kol kinuye nedarim kenedarim. But we didn't say it like by the nazir. So answers the Gemara, mishum the neder u'shvuah, because neder and shavua is always written together. It's like it says, ish ki dor neder lashem o ishava shavua. There it says neder and shavua together. So tani tartin. So then we should teach two of them. Kevin the tani tartin. So now since we already taught two, meaning we taught also nedarim and also shavuot, tani lekulu. So we brought all of them down. So we also added in the charamim and also the nezirut, even though technically speaking you didn't really need to. So ask the Gemara, the litne kenu shavuot, but so 1 second. If Nedarim and Shavuot are always together, because that's in the Torah, so write down Nedarim and then Shavuot. Why do we do Nedarim, Charamim, then Shavuot, and then Nezirut? Why do we do it that way? So answers the Gemara, I did the Tani Nedarim. Once we started with Nedarim, the mitzar cheftzale, that it's on the cheftzah, it's on the object. Tananami Charamim, we taught the Cherem, the mitzar cheftzale, which is also on the object. La Puke Shavuot, which comes to exclude the Shavuot, that it's on you, on the human being, on the gavra, and not on the chefza. Meaning, the first two, neder and cherem, is on the chefza, it's on the object. Shavua is on you, not on the object. You're making a shavua that you are not going to eat the object, that you're not going to eat the which one? Right? So he comes and he says, so therefore, since we learned neder, we learned the cherem, because neder and cherem is both on the object. Then we learned the shavua, which is going to be on the person. So says the Gemara, patach bekinuyin. We started with kinuyin, kol kinuyin nedarim umefaresh yadot. But then we came and we explained what are yadot, what's going on. Meaning, I had to explain to you outside what was the kinui of a neder. What's the kinui of a neder? Kunam, kunach, kunas. I had to explain to you what is the kinui of the cherem. What's the kinui? Charaf. What was it? Charak, charas, charaf. Right? Those are the kinuyin. I have to explain to you all the kinuyim. So you started the Mishnah with kinuyim, and then the next case of the Mishnah is ha'omer lechavero yadot lakinim. Right? Meaning it's not like it's yadot for a neder. It's not really a kinui, because the kinui you have to use the other languages. Here it's not. It's like a hand. It's like a division, but it's not a kinui. The kinui was a nickname, so I'm substituting the name. Okay, so instead of using the word isur or korban, I'm using haram, kunam, kunach, kunas, right? Those are the three substitutions, okay? But that is, yadot is it's an extension. It's not a substitution of the word. It's an extension. What was it? I'm mudrani lecha. I'm meruchat mincha. I'm distanced to you. I'm menudet to you. I'm all, all these things. Those are called yadot lakinim. So what does it make sense? You're starting the Mishnah telling me about kinuyim, and then you're talking about yadot, right? Umefaresh yadot, haomer lecha v'lo mudar ani mimcha, right? V'tu yadot, he comes and he says, inshe. What does that mean, right? Right? He didn't even mention it, which means he should have said, what are the yadot? And he should have explained to you that yadot are like nedarim, and then he continues. So answers the Gemara, Aidi Behon, the Tana is talking about Yadot. The Chasurim Echser Avachtani, but we're lacking part of the Mishnah, and this is how you have to have the Mishnah. Kol Kinuye Nedarim, Kenedarim. All the Kinuye Nedarim are like Nedarim. V'Yadot Nedarim, Kenedarim. And Yadot Nedarim are like Nedarim. And then, right, we come and we explain about the Yadot. That means basically, even in the Mishnah, the beginning of the Mishnah, we also had Yadot. But it was just lacking. It got skipped out from the Mishnah. So ask the Gemara, the Lifrosh Kinuim Bereisha. So explain to me the Kinuim at the beginning. Because how did you start the Mishnah? Kinuye Nedarim are like Nedarim. Then you said the Yadot Nedarim are like Nedarim. And then you explain Yadot. Explain the Kinuim. Answers the Gemara, Ha'ud Salik Mineo Mefarash Bereisha. The last thing that you just mentioned is the first thing they do. Many times you have that in the Mishnah, that the Mishnah says a few different things, and then it starts explaining the last thing that you just said. Why? It was just since you just finished with it, you start that first. So since we mentioned the Kinuye Nedarim are like the Nedarim, and then we said the Yadot Nedarim are like the Nedarim, we're going to explain the Yadot at the beginning. Kiditznan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Bame Malikin, Uvame Malikin. What you like, and Malikin. What and Malikin? You started with Malikin. Then you said Uvame and Malikin. Why are you starting with Malikin? Right? Bame tomenin, ubame en tomenin. En tomenin. We start with en tomenin. Bame isha yotza, bame ene yotza. Lo tetze isha. So therefore, it's the exact same like you. Meaning, just like over there, you start with the positive and negative, and then we come and we mention the meaning the last thing that you mentioned it first. Same thing here, right? We had the kinui, and then we had the adot. We explain the adot first, because that was the last thing that you mentioned. So says the Gemara, says, well, whatever you started with, you don't explain it first. What about Vatram? We learned in another Mishnah. Yesh nochalin u'manchilim, nochalin v'lo manchilim, velo nochalin u'manchilim. Some people, they give over Yerusha, and they accept Yerushas. Some people, they could give over Yerusha, but they cannot inherit themselves. Other people, they give over and they inherit. Yet, right, and there, we do explain. So the Mishnah is explaining the first thing first, not the last thing. Another one. Yesh mutaro le'balehen v'asuro le'yivamehen. Some women are permitted to their husbands, but prohibited to the Yavam. Mutaro le'yivamehen, some of them are permitted to their Yavams, and they're permitted to their husbands. And then these are the ones which are permitted to the husbands, prohibited to, so we start with the first one. A third one. Some of the korban, the menachot, the wine, the meal offerings are obligated with frankincense and oil. Some of them which are oil and not frankincense, and these are the ones which are the frankincense oil, which we're explaining the first one. Fourth Mishnah, right? Yesh teunot gasha. Some korbanot, they need hagasha, which is basically you bring it to the words of mizbeach. Ve'en teunot tenufa, but you don't have to wave it. Some of them they need waving and not hagasha. You don't bring it to the mizbeach, and these are the ones which need hagasha. So you see another one, fourth one, fifth one. Yesh bechol nachala ve'mechol lekohen. There's going to be a bechol for nachala, but he's not a kohen, he's not a bechor for kohen. That means he doesn't need pidyon ben. Okay, bechor lekohen ve'mechol nachala. Sometimes it's a bechor for a kohen, but he doesn't get the nachala. So, which is a bechor nachala ve'mechol lekohen? And then the Mishnah comes and it says, right, it explains it. So I mean, sometimes you have a pidyon ben. Sometimes he's not going to be the bechor for the inheritance. Sometimes it's going to be bechor for inheritance, but he doesn't get pidyon ben. What's going on? So you see that these are 5 different cases, right? That basically what's happening is 5, right? This is 5 different cases where you come and you see 5 mishnayot. So we did start with the first one, not the last one. So answers the Gemara, Hali mishum de'av shilei, right? In these cases, since there's so many halachot, so we explained the first one first. Meaning here, it wasn't just like one halacha, right? It was like, and then we just start with the end. There was a lot of details. So since there was so many details in the middle, we started with the first one to analyze it first, right? So says the Gemara, but if it's going to be very short, so then we start with the last one. So says the Gemara, the Mishnah, says, what about, what does an animal go out with on Shabbat? What does it not go out with Shabbat? The law of Shabbat, there's not a lot of dinim. And then we started with the first one, which is Yotze Gamal. That means we started with the first one, which is the first thing. Okay? So he comes and he says, Ela lav davka, but you're right, lav davka. You're right. Gimel Amud Aleph on the top. Lav davka zimnim farshudu v'patav reisha v'zimna u'disalem v'reshe. It all depends. Sometimes you do the first one. Sometimes you do the second one. It's not like a general rule. Sometimes it all depends on how it is, but it's not a general rule. So because of that, you can't come and start coming and saying that I has to be like this. Okay. So B'ezrat Hashem, with this we finish the first